Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again it is Sunday, and that means it's time for the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, a weekly vlog that I put out where I ask you as my viewers and subscribers about something that deals with guns, gun culture, current events, or the news that I want to get your thoughts and opinions on. And this week's question deals with the new rule from the DOJ and the ATF regarding 80% lower receivers and your ability to buy them, and if you actually manufacture one, what you have to do with them. A lot of people are really up in arms about these, but I was curious about its actual impact. Now, I think it's really important to state that although someone like myself, who has never built an 80%er and has no desire in doing so, doesn't mean that I don't think that they're important and I'm not going to fight for the rights of people that do want to create those. But I really only wanted to ask the actual impact because I know a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are sending me the information. People go, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Does this impact you and everything that's going on in the gun community? Well, that's what I wanted to try to figure out, because I know in my personal life, I don't know many people that have actually built guns from these 80% parts kits. And I was kind of curious, well, maybe there's more out there than what I see. I've never done one because I've always wanted to own the actual thing. After all, I've always thought that owning a real AR-15 lower receiver that's professionally manufactured and then anodized after everything is milled out and drilled with nice engraving is just the way to go. But I totally understand for the many plethora of reasons why someone would want to go in a different direction and make it themselves. And so buying these kits, by the way, I think should be 100% perfectly legal. But since so many people were upset about it, I was just curious, does this impact you? All right, so as I said, this week's poll question is trying to gauge the actual impact of these new rules and regulations. And I know I'm going to have to say this a number of times in this video, so I want you to listen very carefully. That just because somebody like myself, or maybe somebody commenting on this poll, does not find any interest in building 80% lower receivers, that disinterest does not equate to the fact that they do not care, nor will they fight for the rights of other people who wish to engage in the production of 80% lowers. I find that a lot of times when people say, I'm not interested in this, that other people assume, well, they're not fighting for me. They don't like what I do. For example, I am not a hunter. I have never hunted in my life, and I really think it would be very hard for me to hurt any animal unless I was having to put food on the table to feed my family. However, I support the rights of hunters. I support their rights to go out and ethically hunt in a very organized way and do it legally and lawfully that protects the environment and the animals that they are hunting. So just because I'm not a hunter doesn't mean I don't support hunters. Just because I'm not a competitive shooter doesn't mean that I don't think people should be out competing with firearms. It doesn't interest me, but I definitely support their rights. So please bear that in mind when it comes to this poll, that just because I might not own an 80%er doesn't mean I'm not going to fight for you if you absolutely love them. All right, so with that disclaimer out of the way, let's dive right into this week's poll question. With the big announcement this past week of the finalized new rules and definitions from the ATF and the DOJ about what is or is not a frame and receiver, I was wanting to measure the actual impact of this change. If you are a subscriber to my channel, no doubt you feel this is a grave infringement of our rights and want to see this new rule repealed or not implemented. The bottom line is we know they are trying to make 80% receivers illegal to own, purchase, or finish. However, setting our passions aside, how impacted are you by this new rule? Do you own any firearms made from 80%ers? Do you want to buy one in the future? Do you have little or no interest? Do you think they should be illegal? Let me know in the poll. But please bear in mind that not being interested in 80% receivers does not mean that you agree or do not care about the new rule. And I think the reason this is so important is because the anti-gunners, especially those in government, want to chip away at things that not a lot of people are very passionate about, or maybe it doesn't affect a lot of people. And I think a great example of this was bump stocks back in the Trump era, because not a lot of people, proportionately to the amount of gun owners in the United States, either owned bump stocks. Most people didn't even know what they were. It was kind of the low-hanging fruit. Hey, we can get rid of this. And a vast majority of gun owners didn't care because it didn't affect them. It's like that saying that came from World War II, and I forgot where exactly it came from, but it was like, first they came for this class of people and I didn't say anything because I wasn't them. And then they came for this person and I didn't say anything because I wasn't them. And eventually they came for me and nobody was there to speak up for me and stand up for me. I know that I'm paraphrasing that, but you guys know what I'm talking about. As Joe Biden says, you know the thing. But we're talking about our Second Amendment rights. And sometimes it feels like they're just trying to chip away at the low-hanging fruit that's on the edges of the Second Amendment that doesn't affect a lot of people. Because after we get used to these infringements that obviously are unconstitutional, well, a vast majority of people might begin to accept greater infringements. And I think that's the greater plan. That's the insidious part about all of this. But the actual impact of this, I wasn't really sure. And it was really hard to gauge from watching YouTube, because I know many of the legal Second Amendment channels were up in arms. A lot of the firearms channels that I follow were up in arms and spreading the word. So I was like, wow, maybe I've missed the boat on this, because I've never built an 80%er. I've never even tried, and it's never really interested me. After all, I prefer the real thing. If I'm going to build a Colt M4 clone, well, I want a real Colt M4 lower receiver. I don't want to go build one, then have to get it engraved, and then after I mill it out, well, it has to be re-anodized or finished in some way. I just don't like that. But that's just me personally. But just because I don't like it doesn't mean other people do or don't. So I'm not trying to infringe upon their rights. Once again, don't misconstrue what I'm saying. And in my personal life, I only know about 1 or 2 people that have actually built them from these kits. So I thought I needed to ask my subscribers, how much has this impacted you? So let's see what you guys said with this week's results. With only 845 votes as of me filming this, we have I own many and or like to make guns using 80% receiver kits, 13%. I own or built one just to try it out, 10%. I have little or no interest in 80%ers. I want the real deal, 62%. I feel 80%ers are poor quality and not worth the time, 7%. And something else, explain in the comments, 8%. I really have to be honest with you, because in some ways I kind of suspected this was going to be the result, that it doesn't really impact a lot of people. And that's why I think this rule is going to go through and be implemented, because not a lot of people are really that passionate or interested in it. I know personally, although this rule I think is a grave infringement, it doesn't really affect me. I had no plans on building an 80%er. I've never even looked at them. And you guys know I'm into guns of all types. But I was surprised, I guess, in some way, because I was expecting more people to have done it, with as many companies out there that produce these kits and these receivers and these jigs, and as passionate as people were online, and with as many comments as the DOJ got with this new proposed rule. But the vast majority, and I mean vast majority of people, had little or no interest. And that can be good or bad. As I said, from a good standpoint, well, I'm glad that you're not being impacted. You're not having to run out and follow all these rules and then potentially getting in trouble. But it's also bad because it means the 80%ers are the low-hanging fruit, as I mentioned before, and they're easily gone after by the anti-gunners. It's kind of a double-edged sword from the way that I look at it. But let's go through each one of these and I'll give you guys my thoughts and opinions. First off, we have I own many and or like to make guns using 80% receiver kits. Now, I know there's a few people out there, they comment on my channel, I've watched their channels, and to be very honest with you, I guess I like some of the pros of it, in that you can customize a gun, you can go get them engraved with specialty logos if you're doing some type of clone build, and get things that you can't buy commercially. I also know it gives you a great sense of pride in that you built the firearm, you milled it out. So you have more ownership and pride of ownership in its construction because your hands had a role in building it. That is really cool. I also understand from the standpoint of, well, you don't want the government having another 4473 on you. And it is your constitutional right and historical precedence to be able to make home-built firearms. So who should be able to stop you? And I totally get that. Then we have, I own or built one just to try it. 10%. Okay, so this is actually more people than I thought. And I think somebody in the comments section when I was going through them said, well, I think you should have had a category of just, I want to buy one just to have it. So I kind of put that in this category as well. I definitely see the advantages to it. As I said, I think if I was going to go with an 80% kit, I might have bought one of those P80s, those polymer lower, the pistol, the Glocks, probably more than the AR. The AR ones always look a little bit more labor intensive to me versus the polymer 80 ones. But when it comes to the scope of my interest, it never really piqued it that much. But for some people, I can definitely see, hey, I like to fiddle around in my garage. I got all the tools. I'm going to buy one of these things and see what it's like. I may not like it. And sometimes these kits, especially if it was just the lower receiver with just the jig, they were pretty affordable and pretty cheap. And maybe people were thinking, well, they make this kit in this particular color that Glock or Springfield doesn't make, and I'll be able to have that particular frame. I can add all the accessories that I want. I definitely see the advantages of that and why people would want it. And then maybe go, well, I prefer the real thing, or I'm just not that passionate about it. Then we have, I have little or no interest in 80%ers. I want the real deal. Now, this was the majority and also the one that I would have voted for. And once again, just because I have little or no interest in 80%ers doesn't mean I don't care. I'm still going to fight for your right to be able to have them and build them. But for me, as I mentioned, I would just rather have the real deal. It's not that I don't trust my ability to make them or drill them out properly. It's just that, well, I want the real Colt. I want the real Springfield. I want the real whatever it is, a Glock. I would rather have that because I also look at things going forward for resale. After all, for me, guns are partially an investment. No, not all of them, and no, your portfolio shouldn't be just guns. But trust me, there are guns that I bought at, let's say, $2,000, like an FN SCAR 16S, brand new. That's now well over $3,500. Same thing goes with an HKP7 M13. I think I bought mine for $3,100, and now those things are getting close to $5 grand. At one time, I owned a Colt Python. I bought it for $1,400, and I think about 4 years later, I sold it for $2,600. So sometimes guns can be investments, and I don't know what the value retention is on an 80%er. So, and I know if I was buying one, well, I'd rather have one made by an actual manufacturer than somebody in their garage. Not that I don't trust them, I just think about the value long term. But that's something to take into consideration. But if you don't care about that, well, I understand why maybe the 80%ers are an attractive option. Then we have, I feel 80%ers are poor quality and not worth the time. Now, the reason I included this one is I have watched videos of people buying these kits and they use the jigs and they really take their time with drill presses, not just using hand tools and really filing everything down, and the guns never quite work right. The one thing that people don't appreciate about firearms is they are mechanically very complex things. And even the slightest tolerance differences, the issues that you have with a slide mating up with a receiver, or if a hole is drilled 1/1000th off, the gun will not work right. And sometimes it's not your fault. It could be the company that made the jig, or maybe the tool you're using isn't the right tool for the job. I know having the sharpest drill bits that can hone out and drill out the right materials are really important. And so sometimes when people are building these because the tolerances are a little bit off, or their hands a little bit shaky, or the jig's a little bit off, or maybe the 80%er made out of polymer in the case of the P80s might not be that good, and for some reason it warps or bends, and I've seen a lot of people claim to have a lot of problems with them. So some people might have those experiences. I know that I've seen people that do, and that can definitely be a concern. And another reason why I say I just rather just go buy a Glock or a Colt AR because I'd rather have the real deal manufactured by a company that knows what they're doing, and if I have an issue, I can send it back to them for service and repair. And then we have something else explained in the comments, 8%. And I think a lot of those comments were, as I said, people saying, well, now that it's trying to be banned, I'm kind of interested in buying one, or I just want to buy the kit and hold on to it because maybe it's more of a novelty thing and I don't really care about it one way or the other. It's just a collection thing. All right, so that's my thoughts and opinions on all of this, and maybe I've made you upset and maybe I haven't. I'm kind of curious to see what you guys are going to say in the comments. But let's see what you guys had to say with our top rated comments of the week. And with our top rated comment of the week, we have Matt Moore, who said, no interest at all for me, but I completely support the legality of 80% lowers. Further, it is not up to the president or the ATF to redefine existing laws or change definitions. The reason I am not interested, I get no personal satisfaction from building it myself. I don't trust my skills to build from an 80%, and I really don't care to invest in the time or tools to learn. I like buying from a reputable brand name manufacturer that stands behind their product. And I think Matt and I are on exactly the same page. I think the only advantage to these 80% kits is if in the far off future we live in some type of Second Amendment dystopian society. Well, the ability for you to make these firearms at home would be a huge advantage because you can't buy them, you can't sell them, but you probably still need them. But I think that's way off. And if we work hard as Second Amendment advocates, that day will never come. Well, hopefully. But Matt and I are on the same page on this one, and he echoed my sentiments exactly. Then we have my great sponsor for all of my range reports, Brownworks, who says, I have used kits many times to build guns with my kids. It's a great learning experience and a good way to spend time with family. And you know, he brings up a fantastic point. The Second Amendment isn't just about defending our nation from enemies, foreign and domestic, or self-defense. It can be a great hobby for a family to enjoy together. And the one thing you do learn from an 80%er is how a gun is made, how it's manufactured. You learn about all the things that go into it. I know that when I started to build AR-15s, I learned so much about AR-15s. It wasn't just go buy a gun, go to the range and shoot it. But when you actually have to put every single part in that lower, every part in the upper, when you see how all the parts mate together, you're like, wow, a lot of thought and engineering really went into this firearm. It's fascinating. And then if you have problems with it in the future, you're able to diagnose those problems better because you understand all the parts that go into it. And as Mark from Brownworks says, it can also be a great family experience. And so if you have a family that's all into the Second Amendment and loves shooting, well, I guess it's kind of like Legos for adults. Hey, sit your kids down. Hey, we're going to build a P80 lower for a Glock, or we're going to build an AR-15 from scratch. Let's do that together. They learned a valuable skill about firearms and manufacturing, and you guys also have some quality family time. Then we have Keith Tate, who says, I have not used a kit as of yet and may never try to build my own, but I want the option. Just because this is something that doesn't or only minimally affects me doesn't mean that I want the right taken away. And Keith is exactly right, and that's what I've been saying this entire video. It doesn't interest me, I don't really want one, but man, am I gonna fight for you guys to have the right to have one. Because who knows, maybe I'll change my mind one day. I fully admit that I get things wrong and my interests change over time. One day I might be the greatest advocate of P80s and 80%ers ever. Right now, I don't foresee it, but I'm very aware that I might change my mind, and I would like to have that option in the future if that day came. Then we have Mojo World 2327, who said, I have little to no interest in 80% lowers. With that being said, it would be irresponsible to allow them to regulate something because of intent or potential. Just a small reminder, we have surrendered many items under regulation without any of them being given back. Keep giving them the inch, it will eventually lead to the mile. Respectfully. And he's absolutely right. This is one of the reasons why I say Donald Trump was not the greatest defender of the Second Amendment. Now, in many ways, he was worse to the Second Amendment than Joe Biden has been. I know Joe Biden has proposed all these regulations, but as of me filming it right now, not many of them have been implemented, where Donald Trump actually banned bump stocks, which in my opinion opened the door for all of this new redefining of frames and receivers and silencer parts and all that, because they were able to redefine a machine gun in contrary clear reading of what the law says. So I blame Donald Trump and the Republicans as much as I do the Democrats, because there's anti-gunners in both parties that don't want you to exercise your rights because they're scared of you. And then finally we have Terry McGinnis, who says, don't own any as of right now, but would definitely like the option available to me should I ever decide to go that route in a build. And I've already said I think the same way. So who knows, maybe my opinions will change. And I think a lot of people probably are in that boat as well. They don't really care about it right now, but they go, it is kind of cool, and maybe one day I'll go down that path. Well, there you go. That is the Texas Gun Vault poll question of the week. I'm surprised in some ways and not surprised in the others. The impact of this new rule from the DOJ and the ATF I don't think is going to affect a lot of people when it comes to the actual material building of 80%ers, and if it affects you and you worry about being in compliance with the law. But I do think it affects us all when it comes to future regulations and the redefining of things in clear contrast to what the law says. So it's kind of scary times. It's one of those double-edged sword things. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. And if you are interested in participating in next week's poll, please go to the community tab of my YouTube channel, and I will also link to it in the description. Go over there, click the link, see what next week's poll is about, vote, comment, and like other people's comments so we can get the top-rated comment of the week. I hope you guys enjoy these polls as much as I enjoy making them. So let me know in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.